Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have back with us Nina Acosta, who's the founder and CEO of Transcend the Light, and we'll be talking about getting out of the constant cycle of anxiety and stress. Nina, welcome back to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me again. I'm happy to be here.
You're welcome, and I guess I'm sort of excited about talking about this because getting out of anxiety and stress means that people are in anxiety and stress, and I know that we all are. I mean, and we do it to ourselves, and I want to talk about the ways that we do it to ourselves and then the ways we can get out of it. So I think this is going to be a really spectacular conversation. So get us started with, in your experience when you're working with your clients, what are you noticing about anxiety and stress?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Everybody's different, but one key component that I'm noticing when my clients come to me with anxiety and stress is that they're stuck in their mind, right? And they're not living in the present. And their mind is kind of like scatterbrained. It's going everywhere. They're thinking about scenarios that may never even happen and like having conversations that they should have had, or thinking that, the world's going to end. They're really trapped in their mind and they're not present in their body, and they're not slowing down to get that inner peace that they desire.
That's a mouthful right there. I think we can go about 9.5 hours on that one statement. But one thing that comes to my mind is this. I've always heard when I'm a constant reader and self-improvement and life coaching and all of those great things, because we never ever truly arrive. It's just like, let's polish here and polish there. And even yourself, we were talking right before recording, you're heading out to Colorado for a retreat for improving yourself personally and professionally. So we always are improving. But here's something that I want to get your opinion on, because I've heard it said that when you feel anxiety and stress, many times it's because you have set the wrong mental frame of reference. So as an example, let's use the example of, the way that something should have gone at work. Well, you might have set the frame of reference to be perfection. And when it falls just a little bit underneath that, it's like, oh my word, it was horrible and things were catastrophic. But you set your frame of reference at perfection and it failed just below that. But in reality, anyone else would look at it and go, wow, that was amazing. And you just have set the bar too high. Is that part of what we're talking about here?
That is one thing that I've noticed too within my clients is that, yes, they do have high standards for themselves, but, lower standards for everybody else, right? And so that's something about like getting in tune to your authentic self and what roles you have around, your life and who you are, because perfectionism is something that a lot of the women that come to me do struggle with, right? And perfectionism can come from many different areas. It can come from the rules that they set themselves from a certain event or trauma that happened into their life. And so they think that everything has to be perfect, in every area of their life when it comes to parenting, being a businesswoman, whatever the case may be, baking, like everything has to be completely perfect because they have this internal need for validation, right, from the external world instead of going inside. So yes, in a roundabout way, that was kind of like a long answer, but that is how perfectionism is created. Yeah. And so it's really tapping into like, what are the rules that they have in their life? What is creating the anxiety and stress? Because that's where it usually comes from. And also if they are truly living, like you have the practical side of, yes, there are things that you can do to get out of that anxiety and stress, but then you also have like, where is that anxiety and stress really coming from? What's the root?
Yes. So then let's dial into how do you find the root? And what I would say is if you can define how you work with clients on finding that root, and then a follow-up to that is, as you were talking there, you were mentioning women, because you focus on female entrepreneurs. I'm certain that there are certain nuances that is are different than how a woman would get to the root of a problem than how a man would. So what are some of the things that you're finding that you need to make sure that you're bringing up when you're working with your female entrepreneurs to make sure that it's really resonating with them?
Yeah, so the methodologies that I use are, I just mainly focus my audience as women, but you work with men or women. And so what it is we basically dive into, like, by asking, you can ask yourself questions, in that moment, be present and ask yourself questions like, why am I feeling this anxiety and stress? What are the thoughts that are coming into my head? Because a lot of times if we slow down and be present, as I mentioned before, we can hear ourselves think, right? Because a lot of times we are in our headspace, and it's usually you're telling yourself, a lot of times it's negative self-talk, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. So everybody's different, but if you just slow down and be present and basically, and it can only, it just takes 30 seconds to really just tune in to that moment and figure out, like, what are you telling yourself? What are the thoughts coming into your head? And then why are those thoughts coming into my head? And where did those thoughts come from? It's like kind of like almost like the who, what, when, where, why, we learned in elementary school.
Yeah.
Is like asking those questions and tuning into what comes up for you in that moment and getting into the root and journaling. I mean, I don't really like to call it journaling, but journaling is a good practice, or documenting, whatever resonates with you. Voice notes. It doesn't have to be like, sitting down, taking an hour a day, especially when you're busy. It could be just pulling up your notepad and your phone, typing in something, like what you're feeling, to document it. Do a little voice note, have some type of recording. To really tune in to why you're feeling that anxiety and stress. And it kind of like asking those questions will lead you to where it's coming from, and then creating new rules around that.
I think that's huge. I like the tactical tip that you bring up of like, okay, how do you do it? First, you need to discipline yourself to pause and be aware and notice the who, what, when, why, and how, and to what extent. And then it might just be like, okay, we always have our phone with us. So what little, do you use Evernote, or do you use whatever? And for me, I would say, okay, yeah, I can push a button and speak this, but am I going to go back through and listen to this audio? So for me, it would be like, okay, I would pull up Evernote for my, awareness, check-ins throughout the day, and I would put the date and go, hey, I just was noticing this, and then I'm right back to work. So I think that's a huge takeaway, is when you're doing this, to have something to track. And then what are your recommendations on, once you're starting to notice a trend and some similarities, what do you do about it? How do you take action on that?
Yeah, so once you start noticing basically some similarities, or you even start to get to the root of it, is creating new rules. So this is like a really quick exercise that I give my clients, and it tends to work because a lot of times when we write things down, it helps our brain processes it. And so a lot of times it's a quick exercise that you can just pull out a sheet of paper, and I just have them split the paper in half and basically write down the old rules that they have, or the negative self-talk, and then more elevated version of it. And then as you write that down, you're starting to integrate it into yourself. And so basically they're starting to realize what they've been telling themselves is not true. There is really no evidence of it. If you really look at it, like, I am not worthy, all the stuff that comes in their head. I was like, when is there a time that that's been true? And then usually the answer is like, I don't know. I'm like, so they create like a more elevated version of that, that I am worthy, I'm deserving. It's different for everybody. And I do help them with that, because it definitely does, for it to stick, have to resonate with you and your soul. It has to be something that you actually believe. And depending on where you are in the journey, that might look different.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really, really good point, because it's different for everybody. And here's the other interesting thing. Haven't you ever watched a movie before and you've seen it a couple, 3 times, and then you pick up something like, oh, hey, I forgot about that part, or, ooh, that's a new perspective, and same with reading a book. Well, the same with our, noticing things, and we might be in a different headspace because, we just came out of a tough time at work, and now I'm noticing this about this, feeling that I had, or this thought, or this struggle. And so I think it's always neat to realize that we don't ever check a box and like, done, never going to come up again, or this is the way it always is for me. It's fluid, right?
It is. Yeah, it is always fluid. With that, because we're always evolving and growing, especially if you do want to be on the, personal development journey, it's always fluid. And with everything that we do, like even our goals and our affirmations and everything like that, they're always going to change, right? So it's good to always take a look at it, maybe again in 30 days and revisit, and it might change for you.
Yes. Okay, good. So now let's move into talking about creating an unapologetic life on your own terms. That's something you work with your clients on. So define unapologetic life, and how do you create one? Because that, number one, is something that's unique, and it really, to me, gives me the feeling of you're putting this whole barrier around yourself so that it doesn't matter what people think or say about you. Here's me, and I'm moving forward, and I'm not checking every move against what this person might think or that person might think.
Yeah. So what that means is basically, as we mentioned before, getting in touch with your most authentic self, unraveling everything that comes to thoughts, the emotions, and the energy that is not yours, right? And really finding who you are at your core. Because a lot of times, what I have found working with my clients is a lot of people create goals, and they, create a vision in their head of a life that they think that they want, but it's not really truly authentic. It doesn't resonate with them, and they go after their goals. And once they're there, they're like not satisfied, right? And because that goal was probably mostly something that they were taught or to go after, like it could be from conditioning from society. It could come from many different places. And so what that actually means is getting to the core of who you want to be. Because the thing is like we all think that we're chasing material things, right? We all think that we want certain things, but that's not actually what we're going for. We're looking for a frequency and emotion that resonates with us. So we're looking for like success, right? Success means several different things to different people, but we're looking for really is that peace, that joy, that happiness, that abundant life. And once you start creating that internally, what happens is your external world starts to reflect what you're creating internally.
Reminds me of the old saying, if you want a friend, you need to be a friend, or if you need to be the change you want to see in the world. So it kind of all starts inside, because it sounds woo woo to say thoughts are things, but in reality, thoughts lead to things, because if a thought remains in your mind and you mull over it and you're like, ooh, that would be nice if and then you write it down, and then you start noticing things around you like, ooh, I should take that course on that thing that I thought about, and I start talking to some friends. So it really is what you just said is so powerful, because once you start making those improvements inside, then things start changing outside, and many of the times it's just your perspective of the things change. It's not really the things themselves changed, right?
Yeah, well, it's your perspective of the things, and it's also the frequency that you're putting out into the world, right? Because you said thoughts are things, or thoughts aren't necessarily things, but thoughts do have a frequency. So, if it's a good frequency, or if it can be also a negative frequency, and that's why a lot of times a lot of people struggle is because they never get to the root cause of their thoughts, and so those thoughts keep reappearing and manifesting itself, and it keeps creating a pattern of self-sabotage in their life. So that's why it's really important to get to the root of what you're thinking and creating that, that emotional space within yourself to create the truly authentic, beautiful life that you desire. And that looks different for everybody.
So what do you say to someone that would go, I agree with everything you're saying right there, and I have tried this before, and I can't do it. I can't picture even what I want, or I can't, if you ask me, what is it that you really want, your ultimate dreams, desires, and I just don't know. So it's almost like a mental block there, in my opinion, but I know that's a thing.
Yeah, it is a thing, and I've had clients that say that. And so basically what I do is I work with them, because if you hold a deep, unconditional space of love for your clients, they will eventually open up to you. And a lot of times when you say, I don't know, you actually do know. You just don't want to voice it, And so it's really digging in, and sometimes my clients do get triggered by me, but that's what I'm here to do, to help them create whatever it is that they want to create. And there is a process for that. But it's really, you always know, a lot of times, if you really check in with yourself, you're just not ready to say it. Like you're just not ready to vocalize it.
It reminds. Go ahead.
Oh, I think that sometimes I honestly say, but what if you did know? Because they usually do know.
I've heard that before. It's almost like something triggers in your mind, like, what if you did know? And then you're like, well, in a perfect world, if I did know, then I guess it would be this. And then that's like, it was there all along.
Right.
Back in the day, I went through a sales training program, and they would say to ask these levels and layers of questions like, hey, what's important about, saving money to you? And they're like, well, I want to, take vacation this year. And many people would go, oh, that's the most important thing. Let's talk about vacation. But in reality, if you ask, well, what's important about the vacation to you? And it's like, oh, well, it's about getting away from work. And, well, that's even it tends to be important. But, well, what's important about that? And and you go deep, deep, deep. And each response is like, well, what's important about that is. And ultimately, it's like, because I want to spend time with my father who's dying and we didn't have a good childhood. And now that. You know what I'm saying? That now is, and sometimes it is like baby steps. It's like, don't try to do the whole thing all at once, or don't try to tell me the whole, your life dream. But what's this, which then leads to this, and then it just starts to be like, okay, now you kind of get your momentum going.
Yeah, and that's great that you mentioned that, because that's so true. Because, and you have to ask those questions, because you have to realize that everybody has a different worldview and a different perspective, because we have all had different experiences, as we were growing up. So people perceive things differently. So it's really important to find out, what does that actually mean to you or to my client? And I ask them that just to kind of like dig a little deeper, because everything has a different meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what do you find is some of the best ways that if you have someone that's like, okay, I'm tired of anxiety and stress, and I do want to live an unapologetic life on my own terms, and I'm seeing that you're telling me to do these things, what's the first place that you have people to start?
Well, the first place I would have people to start is really, finding a coach, right? Finding a coach, because you need to be accountable to somebody, and it's so helpful to have a coach that resonates with you, and that's important too. Like, not to go find any coach, just find a coach that resonates with you, and you can, like, when you hear their messaging, it's like they're speaking to you. And that's super important for integration. Number two, I would say some quick things is to do the exercises that I mentioned. They can do it, by themselves, but you also want that accountability too. Also, especially I found a lot of times my clients that are in that space, they have lost some trust within themselves because they don't follow through, right? And so that's why it's important to find a coach to help you follow through on what you're trying to do. But you can do the exercises that I mentioned, but also on the fly, and things that do work is it doesn't have to be something difficult. You always have breathwork exercises that you can do. You can, breathe in for 5, hold for 5, and release for 5. And do it until you feel like you're back into what I like to call, your heart space, out of your head. And you can do it with counting down as well. But another method that I learned from an energy healer in Sedona is tapping in between where your breaths are. There's like an in-between space. It's like tapping there when you're feeling anxiety and stress. For like a minute or two, and that completely relieves it until you're ready to go back, and dive in a little deeper.
Awesome. Well, I think what you said about a coach sounds cliche, because it's like, oh, you need a coach. But so many times that's just the case, because you're too close to yourself to realize things about yourself. And you might, you've seen the movies on TV where someone goes into the psychiatrist and they, sit down and they're like, okay, well, tell me about yourself. I'm like, what about? No, just tell me about it. And they do that for the reason to say, where are you going to start? And there's so many things that someone would listen for to go, ooh, they're thinking this way. And then you ask a question and you're too close to the forest to see the trees. So having that coach that has dealt with these similar successes, and they can draw you through and guide you through these kind of things, and to have a coach like, let's say yourself, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, where you didn't just learn something back in the 90s and you're just kind of regurgitating it over and over. You're constantly yourself being improved and sharpened. You're going to an event this weekend, and that's the mark of a true champion. So I think that's a huge piece for people to consider as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does sound cliche, and for the longest time, I didn't think I needed a coach either, right? And so, but once I entered the world, that's one of the reasons why I evolved so quickly, was because I had a coach. I mean, I've been on the couch too with psychologists, and I would make little shifts, and because I was never really getting to the root cause, I was just putting a Band-Aid on it. I was just like, oh, there's a Band-Aid. And I would take a couple steps forward. And it wasn't really until I was at the point where I'm tired of being in my pain and I'm ready to live an unapologetic life on my own terms, that I was like, okay, what?
Yep. I've heard it said, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, that's when, the teacher will appear.
And did I lose you?
Nope, I'm still here. So, having that coach relationship is important. In fact, it reminds me of, think about your favorite sports star that's the greatest of all time in whatever sport. They've got a coach. In fact, they probably have 3 or 4.
Yeah, they do. And it's just, and always, it's going to be a progression.
Yeah. And you again, like the sports analogy, you might think, the top of the game, what else do they're already winning, 20 Wimbledons or 2 Super Bowl. What do they need to know? Well, it's, polishing and staying on top. So having that mindset of, it's not just for the elite athletes, it's for people that want to improve themselves, and having that coach relationship is so strong. Well, I tell you what, Nina, we kind of wrap up here with bringing it all down to, if someone is interested in exploring your coaching, what's the best way they can reach out and connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. They can visit my website. It's transcendthelight.com. There is a contact form on it. It goes to my email, and I will reach out, or you can email me directly at info@transcendthelight.com.
Awesome. Nina, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure being here. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.